שהוא עוצר קולנוע וגם וידאו, בין היתר של הטרנסמדיאל הגדולים, לעצור עבורנו תוכנית סרטים, והוא הצליח בזה די טוב. אנחנו הקרנו את כל הסרטים כרגע בסינמטק ירושלים. בחודש פברואר הסרטים יוקרנו בסינמטק תל אביב, כולכם מוזמנים. הפרטים על הסרטים זה מופיע באתר של המכון. ניתן פשוט הדיבור לפלוריאן, הוא ידבר באנגלית. אם יש לכם שאלות או בעיות על זה, אז אנחנו נדבר על זה. פיטר.
Then we can start. Change of plans.
Thanks a lot, Amos, and thanks, Eyal, for making it possible that I'm here in Tel Aviv after so many years. I was here the first time with Videozone 4 in 2008. And so it's an honor to me to present a little bit the history of Transmediale and give a more in-depth insight into last year's festival, and also screen at the end some short films I showed last year at Transmediale. But I want to start now, and not to forget at the end, to really tell you about the Art of Utopia film series I curated, put together for the Goethe Institute, which already screened at the Jerusalem Cinematheque, and now going to be at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque starting on the 8th of February with a film by Helga Reidemeister from 2004, Texas Kabul, Women Against War. Then it goes on the 11th with Next Stop Utopia by Apostolos Karakassis from 2015, which is about the occupation of the Viomin factory in Thessaloniki, and how it's transferred by the workers into a collective production of organic soaps and all the struggles related to that. Wild Plants is on the 13th of February here at the Cinematheque by Nicolas Humbert from 2016, which is about urban gardening projects and all kinds of agency related to nature and in urban environments. Orientierungslosigkeit ist kein Verbrechen. I didn't prepare for English. Perfect. By Marita Neher and Tatiana Turansky, which also deals with the so-called refugee crisis in Greece and how, as a German journalist, you may want to deal with it. So it's a sort of fictional film with lots of documentary levels in it. And Free Lunch Society by Christian Todt from 2017. It's a documentary about the unconditional or the basic income, the discussion about basic income as a maybe solution to the crisis of the social conditions and economic conditions of our today's democratic societies. And then on the 26th, again, it's a short film program in Tel Aviv at the Goethe Institute. That's the one I present tomorrow at the Fander Jerusalem Institute. And here we have films by Israeli artist Asaf Gruber, The Right, or films by Philippa Cesar, Misha Leinkauf, Matthias Wermke, and Dorine van Meel. So it's the opportunity to see that short film program then again as well in Tel Aviv. So that's for now, so that I didn't forget to really introduce this, and that's also been the main reason to come to Tel Aviv. But I'm also very delighted to present to you or to talk about Transmediale. It's oops. No, stay. Transmediale is a Berlin-based festival and year-round project that draws out new connections between art, culture, and technology. All activities of Transmediale aim at fostering a critical understanding of contemporary culture and politics as saturated by media technologies. Over the past decades, the annual festival has turned into an essential event in the calendar of media art professionals, artists, activists, and students from all over the world. So last year it was the 30th anniversary, so it's the first the first festival as a video art festival that took place in 1988. And so it's important to understand that it's not only the festival, there's also a strong archival or idea of archiving media and preserving the own archive of Transmediale. And Transmediale resource means to have all kinds of activities throughout the year as well, against the background of a network of project spaces dealing with digital art and digital culture in Berlin. So it goes, and also publishing, continuing, let's say, putting articles online and publishing a journal throughout the year. And so the upcoming festival is under the theme Face Value. It starts exactly in 1 week. I'm going to talk about it more at the very end, because I want to focus now on the 30 years of Transmediale edition from last year. It was entitled Evolusive. It takes place at the House of World Culture in Berlin, which is a very central location. Actually, that was a sort of Congress Hall and donation of the American people to the West Berliners at that time, built in the late 1950s. So it's a really sort of the whole Cold War scheme and intention to provide a statement for a free and democratic culture, so to say. At this location, it's sort of ingrained in that building, which has one main auditorium, which you see there. It's called also the Pregnant Oyster in colloquial language, and you have some other exhibition halls in there. So it takes place there, which is very good because you can fit in really quite a big mass of people. So here we have the let's say the foyer design by Raumlabor of last year's Transmediale. But to go back in its history, just here for 30 years of Transmediale, it had a very special structure. Normally it's 5 days at the beginning of February, and last year it had a different structure because it was running much longer. It went on till March because the exhibition was bridging those 2 dates, and you had other events in the middle and kind of closing the whole exhibition and the festival of last year with a so-called closing weekend. So there were 2 more days of activities in the HKW last year. So it was really a very special edition for the festival, with also with larger funding as well, which provided the possibility to extend the exhibition over 4 weeks and not only 5 days. So that was really important, but also quite unique for that moment. But to go back in those 30 years of history, what's interesting about Transmediale, or the so-called Video Fest as it started with its title, it relates to actually the let's say development or the transformation of the International Film Festival in Berlin. In 1971 there were scandals and big crises with the Berlinale. And that also led to establishing a new section of Berlinale, which is called the International Forum for for New Cinema. That was then organized by at that time called Freunde der Deutschen Kinemathek, and at the same time they also established the Cinema Arsenal in Berlin, which is still a very important kind of cinematheque-like cinema in Berlin. And the forum started in the mid-1980s to open up, and they would show, let's say, world cinema more independently produced, more political, much more political than the, let's say, the competition for feature films that Berlinale ever could really reach. And in the mid-80s they started to open up to new formats. On the one hand Super 8, and on the second hand video. Video kind of prevailing as more the medium of the future. And more artists or even students of film schools starting to work with video and video technology. So, and out of that, special programs on video evolved the first video program organized by Medienoperative, which then became the Video Film Fest and the Video Fest, which then transformed into Transmediale a decade later. And the Medienoperative in Berlin was a founded in 1977. So I talk about West Berlin, yeah, by Hartmut Horst, Eckhard Lottmann, Pim Richter, Karin Steffen, and Burkhard Feugers, as a center for independent video production and video culture. And all over the place in the 70s, when video technology became more available and more inexpensive, these video centers were founded in all kinds of, like in Freiburg in the south of Germany, in Amsterdam and so forth, in order to provide facilities for your own video production, and also, as here in the case at Medienoperative in 1978, to present video works, so exclusively focusing on video technology in opposition or in contrast, let's say, to cinema and to film-based or celluloid-based film production, and of course also as an alternative to commercial or mainstream TV production, because that were often involved or related to education as well. So what they did at the Medienoperative at that time, they had editing facilities here. You see old U-matic machines, and they would educate youth to use them. They would give video classes, and they would rent out video equipment. Here it's a sort of improvised studio setup. And they would do video production about lots of social and political issues, very local ones as well. For instance, in Berlin at that time there was a very strong squatters movement in the early 80s, late 70s, lots of housing struggle going on. So Medienoperative or members of it would go and document, they would address issues of the second generation of migrants in Berlin, or other, let's say, issues of urban development and also of urban youth. So here we see them shooting a documentary about the housing struggle. And what's really very important, let's say, as a technological step that then really started in the 70s to really prevail or proliferate, was the so-called quarter-pack technology, that you would have the video camera. Here you have the video camera, you have still that separated with a cassette deck recorder, and you have the microphone which could provide sync sound recording. So that could be carried now by some, and that kind of already before 16mm technology with smaller cameras and sync sound technology really revolutionized documentary in the 60s. So direct cinema is unthinkable without that possibility to have a small team to go out and shoot directly without artificial light and so forth. And that is like now in video the same possibility, of course, then with the new option then prevailing also in the 1980s, with video more and more entering consumer market, that for the first time it was possible to easily copy and produce a large number of copies in video, which for film or even Super 8 was still much more expensive and much more of a hustle to do so. But with video and the VHS tapes, that was very easy, and then you could a totally different means of distribution also on the independent level. So that was really the moment for these, let's say, this technological shift to really provide the ground for a new type of media activism. And and of course this not only happened in Germany, all over the place. Here we have one, sorry, it's very bad resolution from the internet. That's a photo associated with Paper Tiger Television that was not founded in 1981 in New York City. And the slogan was really like, don't just watch TV, make it. And they're, until today, they're producing films, short films, documentaries, shows for public access TV channels. So that was really a global movement at this moment, the so-called camcorder revolution, in order to produce counter-information and alternative media. On the one hand, criticizing mainstream media, and the same producing your own media and try to distribute it. So, am I now here on my paper? Sorry. Yeah. So, but also, of course, in terms of how to really enter or take over maybe mainstream media, there also soon set in a sort of disillusionment, or just to realize, okay, it stays, of course, within a certain niche, or you have very tight limitations to that. And I suppose that was also a frustration that led Medienoperative to get more and more interested in creating a festival that would look at video art and independent video documentary production, and to create a forum for that, and not continue in that way exclusively with the media center production. So that's in 1988, they had the first Video Film Fest, but that was still very much directly related to the International Forum of New Cinema. So as you see, so it's been really part of that. And only by 1990 they would have their own independent festival, but still have it associated, let's say, in terms of dates, be close to the Berlinale, and that's still today. So in early February we have Transmediale, in mid-February, this year it's different, it's 1.5 weeks later, but usually only a couple days after Transmediale the Berlinale starts. And so at that time, on the initiative of Micky Queller, the first Video Film Fest took place, and only in 1990, as I said, it was really independent. But still in February, and you see over like almost more than 10 days. So that was a poster of Video Fest 1990, and that's, yeah, what's interesting here. So they have a monitor space. So at that time still you would really see, like we do today, on a flat screen, but then you still would have a old school TV set where you would see, so video projectors were still pretty, I'm not even, yeah, 1990 they existed, but I mean it was still a very, let's say, high-end technology, but mostly works produced for monitor, but they would also have a video cinema. And they still, because that's the old Kino Arsenal in West Berlin, in Welser Straße, they would also use the Arsenal still to do their video screenings at that time. So, and there were also exhibitions with video installation, and it opened up to new formats, because it was also about this so-called multimedia at that time, and the big new technology for it that excited people and that allowed for a new type of interactivity was the CD-ROM, where then you could have certain choices to go that track or the other. So a little interactive, I mean CD-ROM is really, you hardly can run it anymore on our operating systems, but for a short moment or some years that was really the new thing and the new technology, which got further developed into what we have today in let's say video game and computer animation. So what then in the mid-1990s set in, and where VideoFest had struggled to kind of open up to, was in 1995. Some of you remember very clearly the World Wide Web started, or really got to become, with the first Netscape browser, something that really entered more and more people's everyday life, and that kind of initiated or a short-lived moment, let's say, for a couple of years of very early internet art and of a discussion about the new possibilities of the internet as a sort of democratic platform, as something that might also be not become such a marketplace as it is now, and as it kind of developed into in a short time, but that set that time, let's say, to have a very controversial discussion about the possibilities and the future of the internet and what it means in terms of social interaction and political agency. And so in Germany there was this book in 1997 published by Piet Schulz and Gert Lobink from Amsterdam, against the background of this, one of the early digital culture and art related mailing lists called NetTime, and the so-called Net Critique. And so for VideoFest, there was a very slow process to open up to this new, let's say, realms of digital technology, and still advocated a lot, let's say, the old video installation, the physical experience, the analog, more analog produced media. But over time, they couldn't prevent not to open up or let that in, or also, let's say, become a platform to discuss these new developments in in digital media and technology. So in 1997 at the 10th Video Fest, they already introduced a new name, Transmedia, still with Mickey Queller, the founder of the Video Fest, being the director of it. And they tried to also dissociate from Berlinale, so they went to May, but it didn't work. So in '98 they already were back in February, and now really called Transmediale. So that shift in the name, and also to open up to the new, let's say, to get rid of the video. Here still we have the 11th Video Fest, and then the year after Video Fest was quitted. So, and that was a, let's say, long transformation, open up from the old video art discourse to digital culture and a more digital production, and having also with, then in 2001, Andreas Bröckmann came as the new director and introduced with that festival DIY, do it yourself, for the first time a new structure where you would have a 2-day conference, and that being accompanied by exhibition and video screenings. So VideoFest before also had workshops and so on, but now discourse got more and more important in the festival. So he writes in 2001 that the festival is searching for new directions, that the theme, the DIY, and the restructuring provides a clear signal for this. It serves the leitmotif, and the DIY serves as a leitmotif and runs as a hypothesis through the festival today. Digital media have the potential to turn passive media consumers into active producers. And here just one image of the media lounge, as they called it in 2001. It was still at Podeville, at the Podeville in Berlin. So only much later it went to the HKW, where it is today. So then I just go quick here. Then after Andreas Bröckmann, we had Stephen Cowards, a Canadian curator who was for a few years artistic director, and then Swedish curator and theoretician Christopher Gansing took over and really introduced it as a festival that is predominantly about digital culture, and also investing or investigating, discussing the new, let's say, situation of the digital society. So this new, as we call it, post-digital condition. And what this, it doesn't mean any end to the digital, but, and I quote here Christopher, on the contrary, the mobilization of the digital both as ideal and material has become subsumed in larger socio-economic and global development schemes, where everything, to some extent, is already digital, and even analog entities are bound up with digital information flows. So that was exactly what Afterglow, the festival in 2014, wanted to address, this all-over impact of digital technologies, how much Big Brother or Big Data becomes Big Brother at the same time. And you may remember that was just shortly after the Edward Snowden case and his whistleblowing, and with Laura Poitras documenting it. Her Citizen4 films surely also screened here in Tel Aviv. And at Afterglow, one of the keynote conversations was then with Laura Poitras on the right side. So here introduced by Tatiana Basicelli, and we had Laura Poitras, Jacob Applebaum, and Trevor Paglen as an artist and photographer who works a lot in that field of big data and state control. And so that was a very, of course, that festival was a huge success in addressing those very prevalent and important issues right at that time when it was really ongoing, and still maybe also everybody a bit under the shock what Edward Snowden had revealed of the NSA practices in terms of big data, in terms of mass surveillance. And that was in 2014. I jumped now to Conversation Piece. That's the festival in 2016, and the film and video program. So I'm in charge, since that festival, I'm in charge of the film and video program at Transmediale, because it still kind of maintained that part, let's say, took it with it for all those years from the old video fest to still have screening programs, and but trying to, let's say, or overlap it more and more and try to create hybrid moments between conference, exhibition and screening and all kinds of lecture formats. So here at the opening of Conversation Piece, and that's the main auditorium at HKW, I had invited Steve Rowell to present his new project Parallelograms, where he's mapping the infrastructure and the location of think tanks, of lobbyist groups in Washington. And by this revealing this incredibly dense and powerful network. So, and that was screened as a loop throughout the opening night. And at one moment we would interrupt that or freeze the loop and have him talk to Brian Holmes about the project for half an hour, and then it went back to the loop. And Conversation Piece was because that's also a different title or different model, which introduces a format rather than a theme. And the idea was to make that festival a little bit smaller, to not do the exhibition, but have more hybrid formats and a different type of conversation. It turned out to be much more work to organize it, because it only meant to bring more people, speakers in to have those conversations. So, and it was really, let's say, the exhibition was quite missing that year. So we were happy that then the year after, with the 30 years edition, we could do really a proper exhibition. I'm gonna introduce it to you as well. Here we have Brian Holmes in conversation with Steve Rowell. But it allowed for the film and video program to also do, try out other formats, to leave the cinema space at HKW. And here I invited Ralf Hohmann, who's an artist and radio journalist, to perform his radio picnic, where he talks about the history of pirate radio and the picnic as a sort of common space. He elaborates on that. So, and this we accompanied then with a few films. So the film program went as far as to also have a sort of radio performance rather than only a screening. Or at that year, I showed as a historical reference a film from 1983, Real Time, Echtzeit, by Helmut Kostat and Jürgen Ebert, which is a really quite amazing and early docu-fiction about the process of digitalization and the kind of speeding up of our perception of reality through computers. And so the main actor in the film is actually a digitally produced landscape for flight simulation. And so you have a fictional, like a love story connected to it, but you also at one point you have art historians and Konrad Zuse, one of the, or whether he's really the one who invented the computer, or at least he was one of the first to do so, to discuss what is that image which has no natural photographic reference. So, and after that screening I had conversation with Thibaut de Ruyter, so I tried to bring together film screening and more of a talk format here as well, as part of Conversation Piece. Okay, now I'm at Evolusive in 2017, and that festival encompassed around 50 events, and they explored how information systems and hybrid techno-ecologies have worked to destabilize the centrality of the human. The program presented new notions of subjectivity as well as of accounting for the increasing role of the non-human. So here we have the foyer situation, and it's by Raumlabor. They're famous for using or appropriating all kinds of material. So these huge plastic sacks, in a way, they're usually used in agriculture to put liquid or all kinds of stuff in there, and if you just put in air, they work very perfectly and put three together in a triangle, they work as seats, as you could build walls with it. So that's what Raumlabor is really known for, to find these kind of ready-made material solutions. And they are always, for many years, they always do the, let's say, the architectural design of the Transmediale in those social spaces of the festival. Here we have Christopher, that's Christopher Gansing, the artistic director, at his opening speech of Ever Elusive. And this was a performance, and they also contributed to quite a bit of other program parts, Rashida Phillips and more Mother in the background from Black Quantum Futurism Collective from Philadelphia. And the contribution of the film and video program to the opening was an installation with four early films by Lillian Schwartz, and it was entitled Hybrid Pleasures. And Lillian Schwartz, it was for me really interesting to start that year's program with that historical reference, and also go back to very early computer animation, where the algorithm is allowed a certain freedom of creation, or a certain arbitrariness of creation, where, let's say, the artist gives away its, let's say, control of the image image creation, and that as a kind of new, let's say, relationship between man and machine. That's Lillian Schwartz working with the joystick on the computer station. So Lillian Schwartz is a pioneer in computer-generated art and animation. Her first films from the early 70s were produced at AT&T's Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill, New Jersey. Mutual exchange and inspiration between scientists, engineers, and artists encouraged the development of digital image processing, which depended at the time on access to computing resources available at corporate or university research facilities. So that's how computer more or less looked like at that time. And that's the Stromberg-Carlson SC4020 microfilm printer. So what it actually does is, you have here, that's what our hard drives are today, you have magnetic tapes with data stored on it, and that is processed the way that it would be how I say, like printed on microfilm. Mm-hmm. So create an output here, and that this would be then chemically processed. That in the end you have microfilm from imagery that was produced by the computer. So it was such a huge machine to only do that, which is very, it's rather, yeah, much more simple today, of course. But that provided the possibility to have really computer-generated imagery on film, and then for artists to use that material. And already, of course, define also or start or trigger that process of computer-generated image through early programming languages that would allow for random processes. And that was very important for Lillian Schwartz and her interest in these processes. At Bell Labs, Schwartz worked with the SC4020 microfilm printer, a peripheral device connected to a mainframe computer in order to output black and white still images of geometric patterns. The certain randomness and unpredictability of shapes generated by programming languages, such as Ken Knowlton's Explorer, were key to Schwartz's investigation of a computational aesthetic that shares creativity between man and machine. The generative imagery was subsequently colorized and animated and combined with images of crystal growth, liquids, laser dots, or stroboscopic effects, resulting in a hallucinatory experience for the viewer of three-dimensional depth. Soundtracks of well-known electronic musicians accompany Schwartz's 4 films, presented during the opening of Ever Elusive. Within the context of the 30th anniversary of Transmediale, this tribute to the seminal oeuvre of Schwartz reflects the recurring theme of computer animation in the first decade of the festival. So we had 4 monitors, like really the old and then the audience could watch that with the headsets. And we had chroma depth glasses, because then some of the shapes you would see in 3D, and we tried to get some from the Cinematheque here, but they are apparently the wrong ones. So I came up very late with this idea, so we don't have the full effect, because I'm going to screen you now 2 short films of Lilian Schwartz. But that was the situation at the opening, and for me a really important kind of starting point for last year's program to have that historical reference. And yeah, to also like give a platform to Lilian Schwartz, at least in Germany, is not that known as in her pioneering in terms of experimental film and early computer animation. So I'm going to switch now and show you, just present to you 2 of her films. Here we have it's Pixelation, that's the very first one from '97, using a little bit, I mean very tiny frames from the microfilm printer. Still lots is done with the, let's say, experimental optical printer technology and colorized, and then UFOs from a year later, also 3 minutes. That comes later. Okay. Just have to switch here for a second.
You can do Command F.
Yeah, okay. Good. Maybe you can turn off the lights. Yeah. Okay, excellent. Can you switch off again? Yeah, here with Chromadepth classes, you would, especially the moving circles, you would have seen really 3D coming out of this. So it's a pity we couldn't go with it. Okay, now we can turn off the light. Thank you. Yeah, just to give you a bit of an idea of last year's exhibition that was curated by Inke Arns under the title Alien Matter. So the show referred to man-made and at the same time radically different, potentially intelligent matter. Here in front you have a piece, the old, like that's a huge, let's say, monolith of old VHS tapes collected by Dutch artist Joep van Liefland, and you can, from the other side, you can go inside actually. It's called Video Palace number 44, The Hidden Universe. And there was, for instance, a piece by Turkish US-based artist Pınar Yoldaş, Artificial Intelligence for Governance, the Kitty AI. So is this the new AI, let's say, leader of the world talking to you as the audience, and with those sort of kitty headsets you would have the opening audience to watch the video. And there was a huge project by Johannes Paul Räther called Protectox 5.5.5.1 PCP. And that's an installation based on the performance Protectorame Forking Horizon 5.5.51 from 2016. And this might kind of remind you of some, then actually this place very much reproduces the aesthetics of the Apple Store, because he did an intervention in the Berlin Apple Store, which then informed that exhibition. But generally his practice is very interesting, so that's his outfit during the performance actually. The lifelines of the worldwide witches, www, Protectorame, investigate people's obsession with their smartphones. They address the relationship of the body to the screen, explore portable computer systems as body prosthetics, and address the materiality, manufacturing, and minds of information technologies. The figure central to the installation is one of the many fictional identities of artist Johannes Paul Räther, Protectorama. Protectorama became known to a wider audience in July 2016 when a performance in Berlin in which gallium, a harmless metal, so we have it all over here, and gallium melts when you put it in the palm, it melts with 30 or 32 degrees, and it looks very much like Quecksilver.
Mercury.
Mercury, exactly. And was liquefied in an Apple Store, led to a police operation at Kurfürstendamm. In contrast to the shrill tabloid coverage, the performative work of the witch is based on complex research and visualizations presented here for the first time in the form of a sculptural ensemble, including original audio tracks from the performance. The figure of Protectorama stems from Räther's cyclical performances system, Systema Identiculturae, which he has been developing since 2009. And Johannes was also then invited for a keynote conversation on strange ecologies from necropolitics to reproductive revolutions, moderated by Diana McCarthy, and together with Steve Kurtz of Critical Art Ensemble. So that was like, we tried to always, let's say, guests of the film program that would also participate in panels, or here an artist of the exhibition would then also become speaker of a keynote at the conference of Transmediale. So really from benefiting from the artists' practices on various levels at Transmediale. There was a temporary library around the topic of Evolusive and the history of Transmediale, installed by Alessandro Ludovico and Annette Gilbert. But of course, what's very important, that's why Transmediale is also pretty attractive for lots of student groups. There's also the level of more intimate, concentrated workshops. So here we have the Quantum Futurism Collective, the Black Quantum Futurists, to have a workshop on alternative temporalities and quantum event mapping. And there was, for instance, a middle session, a panel with different artists and scholars. The Elemental Middle, it was called. We have here Ryan Bishop and Richard Krussin. On the right, Susan Shipley, who teaches at Goldsmiths, for instance, in London. In the middle, Clara Quilomba, a Portuguese artist, and American or US artist and filmmaker Jesse McLean, moderated by Elvia Wilk. And Jesse was also then part of, with her new film at that time, part of the film and video program. And I had her in a program called Feeling Algorithms. And this program addressed the processes in art, music, and the financial market that are not fully rationalizable, and the ambivalent longing for communication with non-human entities. And now at the end of my presentation, I would like to present to you two films out of that program. And my idea was for last year, because it was celebrating the 30 years of the festival, to have in all of the short film programs one reference to the Transmediale archive. To have one work that was screened as a previous edition, and that was Losing Sleep by Doug Porter, a Canadian artist from 1996, which screened at the Transmedia. So really in that moment when it shifted to that new title in 1997. 1997, and that is a 15-minute video with footage of a self-confessed computer hacker who is struggling with chronic insomnia. His work on the computer has become such an all-encompassing cyber world that for him, returning to the grounded physical world is a frightening endeavor. Yet only by submitting to simple physical acts, such as a long, deliberate walk late at night, can he find rest. And the second film I'm going to show you is See a Dog, Hear a Dog by Jesse McLean from 2016. And that is probes the limits and possibilities of communication and of, let's say, our desire to somehow connect to non-human entities. And that's 18 minutes long. So I just would screen those two right after each other, and then I'm almost done with the presentation. Okay.
It's not positive or negative for me. It's what happens at night, right? You know, it's what happens at night. Is that this comes on, right? This just comes on. Not every night, but many, 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 many nights. Things happen. By the time you're about ready to go to bed at night, by the time you start to get sleepy, I mean, you get physically sleepy. When insomnia is bad for me, when I can't sleep, when it's really bad, I'm afraid to lay down. I'm afraid to lay down. I literally cannot physically lay down. The idea of horizontalness is intimidating. I've always thought that the closest experience to not sleeping, being able to not sleep at night, the mental state is a constant stream of disconnected video images that are like fragmented and dispersed, you know, and disjunctive. Imagine your mind is like it's. Sometimes I watch television back when I had a TV and a remote and cable. I usually watch television by just holding down the forward button on the remote. You know what I mean? And like it's like, you know, someone else does it. It's extremely irritating. But when you're doing it by yourself, you can hold it down and it starts to pulse and it starts to flow. Like it starts to, and like you just rip through these 80 channels and they just cycle. You know what I mean? And it just, you know, it just has that kind of, I mean, it has that kind of pulse, that kind of just that shudder of images. That are like, they're not even images, because images would assume that there's some kind of recognizable form. They're not images, they're just visual data. It's a data storm, you know, it's a visual data storm. And it's really similar, it's a very similar kind of perception of your mind framing and shuddering through, not images in the sense of a formal object, but a kind of an overloaded data stream, which is in some sense represented visually, right? So there's this kind of shuttered, static, extremely high bandwidth data storm just pouring through your head. You know what I mean? When I was a kid, I used to wake up in bed at night. Without knowing any advanced mathematics at all, without knowing anything serious about mathematics, I'd lay in bed at night and just as fast as I could in my head recite numbers and equations. I'd be going like 4, 6, 19, 22 times 27 is 62 times 45 log sine of this and cosine bracket over that. And I'd be laying in bed and I would just have as many numbers in my head as I possibly could, and they'd all be piling up and piling up. You know what I mean? And there'd just be this really intense feeling of being carried along. The sense of disengagement in sleep is part of what makes things, when it's bad, it's part of what makes things. that's one of the things which is in some sense like frightening. It's frightening. You know, I mean, not in an obvious superficial sense, but there's times you physically can't lay down. You hit the bed like this, right? Like the actual act of laying down and the closure is the worst, right? It's an act of giving up. The longer I'm awake, the more fragile I get, the worse it is. The more fragile I get, the less able I am to filter the world, and the more the world is just this enormous sensorial stream that can't be stopped, that can't be filtered out. It's as though every single sensation, every single idea is coupled to every other one, and all of them are on me at the same time. Like everything I've ever read, and everything you see, and every sensation comes together in this enormous flow, and there's just a sense of hypersensitivity that nothing can be blocked, right? And nothing can be blocked, that you get this enormous intensity, and it feeds itself, right? Because it drives this constant, it just drives the constant acquisition of new things, right? Of more books, and of more experiences, and of more programming, and of more of everything. Well, I think one of the things we transfer to computers is the fact that it can induce that kind of mental state. It can induce this kind of extremely high bandwidth, kind of flood of images, kind of almost overwhelming mental complexity kind of state. It can just flood this massive quantity of information at you at this kind of hyper speed, machine kind of machine gun technical kind of razor blade rain kind of quality. Stuff comes at you with this kind of shuddering kind of burn, and it has that, you know, that kind of super sensorial mental quality. It can have a bit of a car crash quality to it. Back when I used to own a car, I had 3 accidents when I was like 18, 19, 20, 3 car accidents, and all 3 of them I have these really strong memories of this kind of like the last few seconds of the accident, the car just, like the total out of controlness of it. It's kind of brittleness, you know what I mean? Like you have this kind of brittle quality as the car smashed into the wall, or smashed into the ditch, or smashed into the other car, right? And this real sense of being in this in this out of control technological structure that you absolutely cannot escape. You were in the car. You know what I mean? You were in the car. You really knew it, right? I either do one of the 2 things. I either work, or you try to get into a physical state which lets you try to let your body, especially in the last few years, like I used to just work. I just stay home, work and work, and stay home and work, and then sleep on the floor on my computer for a couple of hours, or sleep on the floor in my room, or sleep with my clothes on, or sleep with the lights on, or just, you know, just give my body a couple hours of sort of grudging kind of, yeah, okay, have that, kind of that, right? But more now, as I try to get more conscious control over it, I try to let my body talk to my mind. I have to put on long sleeve black clothes and go like this, because the black itself is comforting in its sharpness, in its very clearly delineated kind of ability to sort of contain me and provide a frame, right? And at the same time, while it does that, at the same time, at night, in the dark, in the black, it allows you to escape or collapse into the organic, into the organic blackness itself. Very late at night, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning is the best time to do it when there's nobody around, where the streets are silent. the streets are silent, and then it's just you and the blinking stoplights, the traffic lights, and to try to let your body's kind of regular motions, right? Like the act of walking, walk, 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 walk. Let those kinds of acts take the kind of shuddering and just, you know what I mean? How you kind of you really just try to bring that down. The kind of hyperbolic intensity and constant stimulus, structural stimulus of technology. That's become like the norm, the normal sort of way of working. That, you know, for weeks and months on end, I'll be existing in this kind of almost hyperbolic kind of state, and that state is just wildly disassociated from anything physical at all, and yet it's become the natural state. It is the natural technological state, a state of constant intellectual arousal oriented towards nothing other than short-term goal satisfaction, right? And goal satisfaction that is entirely placed inside of a commoditized commercial set of relationships, right? It's just, right? With no future, no goal, no telos, no larger meaning, nothing at all except short-term stimulus response, blasted after with such a high velocity that your capacity to think critically or even humanely just collapses into this vortex of stimulus. Programming itself as an act is violently anti-physical, and it always has been. Violently, aggressively, totally anti-physical in a profoundly gripping kind of sense. I look at it now and I think that it is still so spectacularly destructive in its ability to pull you out of the flesh and produce. I mean, it's produced in me, I think in some ways, this kind of a mental state in which the real world has a kind of foreign purity. Because of that experience, of the mind, of your own mind actually being in some sense out of control, spinning away, and refusing your body what your body needs, and in some sense inhabiting your body, but equally sort of not attacking, but wanting it suppressed, right? And then there's a sense of conflict in yourself, this kind of profound conflict in yourself, and then any resolution of that would actually be a resolution of your own identity. It would not be a resolution of your identity, it would be a suppression or a dissolution of your identity. You know what I mean? That your identity is tied up in that your identity is tied up in that conflict between your mind spinning away, and your body sometimes just being along for the ride, and other times, you know, actively trying to contain the mind. Often, that's the only way in which I can get to sleep, right? Is to sort of come to some kind of acceptance of my own weakness, right? Come to some kind of sense of acceptance of, yes, today I'm not going to, not today or tomorrow, I'm never going to get these things done. I remember,
See a dog. Hear a dog. See a dog. Hear a dog.
No, no, no.
See a dog.
No!
See a dog. Hear a dog.
Hello? Hello? Is anybody out there? Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, my name is Tom.
Hello, my name is Samantha.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Chantal.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Юрий.
안녕하세요. 제 이름은 윤호입니다.
Hello, my name is Ava.
Most people recognize me by my voice.
I sure like being inside this fancy computer.
When I grow up, I'm going to be a scientist.
I'm going to be a famous composer.
My favorite food is pizza.
You will never control me.
Sit. Speak. No, speak.
Good dog. Spin. Good dog. Go ring. Ring again. Good dog. Down. Crawl. Whoa. Crawl. Ah, that's not right. Down. 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 Crawl.
I shouldn't like being inside this fancy computer.
and immortal soul to every man and woman, but not to any other animal or to machines. Hence no animal or machine can think. Not until a machine can write a sonnet or compose a concerto because of thoughts and emotions felt, could we agree that machine equals brain, that is, not only write it, but know that it had written it. No mechanism could feel, and not merely artificially signal, pleasure at its successes, grief when its valves fuse, be warmed by flattery, be made miserable by its mistakes, be charmed by sex, be angry or depressed when it cannot get what it wants. The only way by which one could be sure that a machine thinks is to be the machine.
I understand.
did this film?
From what year? 2016. Yeah, the closing weekend of Transmediale, then that was the 2 last days in early March. There was also the highlight event to have YouTube performances of Laurie Anderson with her The Language of the Future project. And yeah, this year is Face Value, and under that title, Transmediale is probing the values as well as the processes of value creation that have contributed to our present moment of extreme political, economic and cultural divides. As populism gains traction and reactionary voices grow louder and louder in today's media sphere and beyond, how can artists, cultural workers and speculative theorists respond to the current politics of taking things at face value and at the same time face their own values? Yeah, that's in a week, but for now I'm done with presenting or giving a fast ride through the history of that festival in particular and a bit more about last year's edition, the 30 years of Transmediale Ever Elusive. Thanks for your interest.
If anybody has a question or something from Florian, that's the time.
Any recommendation for this year? You're gonna go? Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, of course, I know best my film and video programs, so I want to recommend all of them. No, it's just really hard. It's so diverse. So I think probably it's the best to get something of everything, you know. Screenings, artist talks in the exhibition, conference, keynotes, and so it will be a lot about, I mean, our, let's say, core fields, thematic fields are language on the one hand, the economy, because face value, as we have in the, if I go now on the website, I prepare that. Look here. In the definition, we have two definitions, and one it's really also in the economic sense as a nominal value. So a lot will be about financialization and economic value, and then of course it's about the cultural and social values that we share, and to kind of reflect on those. And now we go into that. To what extent that informs today's conflicts. Yeah.
So can you elaborate a bit about today's conflicts? You said that so it's like facing populism, and I guess, you know, in Germany it's kind of relevant again in a way, and then I mean there is this kind of, I think, Transmediale, from what I know, as this kind of goes along this axis of really following like technological development and this kind of technological avant-garde, and then I guess politicizing technology in a way, in an oppositional way also. Yeah, so like hacking and sort of looking at hegemony and trying to kind of overtake, you know, or also like predict, but then kind of be able to resist also collectively. So what's the news on that, you know, in terms of like what would be the most kind of advanced technology that's kind of implemented or, you know, used or discussed today, you know, what's like most contemporary moment for this edition?
No, I'm also curious what that's going to be revealed, is which ones there are, as you say. But of course,
so
it's going to relate a lot.
It's like
oh, I'm really in charge for the film and video. I don't know all the speakers so well that are invited. But of course, one big topic will also be the whole alt-right and the meme war in the digital realm. And how to address that. So there will be a conversation, for instance, between Florian Kramer and Angela Nagler, who's an expert in really this the usage of the tools of social media and of the memes of the right wing in the US and beyond. So that of course will be a big topic, because that's really a lot invested into also the tools that are used by digital artists as well, or by, let's say, that it's provided on the internet that can be for all types of political means. But there's now a real takeover from the right wing into the fake news, into the kind of algorithmic, manipulated campaigning, into the kind of social bot technologies, and how to deal with that, let's say, with a more positive or approach to digital technology, while at the same time it's so taking over for totally different political reasons and campaigns, and how to deal with that problem. I think that will be addressed quite a lot in that edition in particular.
In relation to what Omer said, you see this kind of change or development, I don't know, from previous editions of the festival, that, let's say, I imagine, I'm not sure, that it was more related to the fascination of technology, or the way that it changes the world, and to a more socio-political kind of aspects of relation to technology,
and also from optimism to pessimism, maybe.
Yeah, I think there was always a high degree of criticality, but at the same time to kind of maintain that, let's say, maker's approach, also maybe the DIY, how you deal with or how you use the technology, not as something that is bad, but that's our tools, and we also want to, let's say, want to occupy it, and not having completely taken over by the commercial or corporate field. So how to preserve it as a different means, also for social and political agency. I think it was always within those two poles, like a really, let's say, discursive criticality, and also examination of especially the commercial, corporate and power game forces behind it, and to how artists use it and develop through it counter narratives and also counter tools through hacking, through misusage.
But then it's like an inner discourse within technology, in a way. So you try to understand what's the political of technology, and then I think that maybe I'm not sure about it. Maybe there's a shift to a kind of using technology to act in the world, or to think again about the world, not technology.
Yeah. So I think that's always what's really at the base of it, but maybe in that edition it's a little bit less about technology than it used in the previous one. Yeah. I think it's more about the political or social political discourse this year.
So
I know in our meetings there was a bit of a worry, where do we where's our focus on digital technology, and how that informs our everyday lives and digital or the post-digital condition. So there was a little bit of a worry, are we too far off from that, and becomes more a conference on, like, for political scientists rather than for artists working with those digital tools. But I think in the end we don't need to worry, because it will always kind of reflect back on it, and it's still an arts festival. So of course it will be a lot about, let's say, artist and activist practices, rather than only philosophy, or only discussing it on, like, the big scale corporate or state power structures. Especially against the background of the issue of values, where you have, and that's what I want to also let's say communicate or make visible through the film programs that high degree of self-reflection that's also within the, let's say, image or digital image production, where you yourself as a kind of act as an author or act as a let's say in your own personal take on the world, and to reflect that relationship also to your object in front of the camera and how you relate to image profile and the power of images and the role of images in politics. So that's also one focus of those screenings this year.
Okay, so thank you very much, Florian.
Thank
you everybody for coming.